But first, I want to acknowledge that we do meet on Kaurna land, and certainly I pay my respects to the elders past, present and future of that amazing cultural group. I want to make a very quick response to just one comment that Professor Smith made when he was sort of, I think, musing over whether governments are increasingly hostile to Christian ideas. And just an observation that, well, first of all, what are Christian ideals? Because there are so many of them. And I think politically in Australia at the moment, in fact, Christianity is a political battleground because there are still votes in Christianity. Dare I mention Hillsong? And we look at our recent Prime Ministers. John Howard, good upright Christian man, and a Methodist to boot, so he must have been all right. Kevin Rudd, probably okay, certainly overtly Christian, well certainly he gave that impression. Then we had Julia Gillard, not a Christian. And of course we've now got Tony Abbott, trained as a priest and obviously a decent Christian man. Of course we have a Christian party, Family First, overtly Christian and of course politically strongly aligned. Curiously, Christianity is about political conservatism, and I think that the community is not so much governments hostile to Christian ideas, it's a community increasingly hostile to governments claiming to be in line with Christian ideals. And I think that's part of the context in which we are in Australia. Of course, the notes I prepared for this evening are about influencing. So here we go. Oh, lost it. There we go. The question is, how do we influence? And there's two ways, the easy way and the hard way. So first, the easy way. There we go. How to influence. This is just from the Electoral Commission. This is just a small snapshot of donations from my favourite group, the Australian Hotels Association, to political parties over the year 2012 to 2013. This is just one part of the register. I'll just summarise. Gambling donations. As some of you know, I've been an advocate for not gambling for about 23 years now. $1.3 million were donated to political parties from just the Australian Hotels Association, the ALH group, registered clubs in New South Wales and a lotteries group in the Northern Territory. I didn't have time to look for the casinos, the packer groups and others. So the easy way to get influence is simply buy it. Donations to political parties. And let me tell you, it works and it works really well. So what about influencing the hard way? Okay, I think the first thing is, what is the common good? Importantly, what are the outcomes we want to influence? Because I want to highlight that I think this is our biggest challenge, actually knowing what we want to influence. Is it poverty? Is it about asylum seekers? What is it? What's the issue? And what's the change we want? For example, I have to throw this slide into every presentation I give at the moment. It's my slide at the moment, and I've just stolen it unambiguously from Professor Joseph Stiglitz, recently in Adelaide, Nobel Prize winning economist. What this does is to show the income, proportion of a national income owned by the top 1%. The top 1% of that country. The green bar is the 2008 to 12 period. The brown bar is 1980. So if you look at the United States, now 20% of the wealth of that country is owned by the top 1%. In Australia, down there, we've got nearly 10% of our wealth is owned by the 1%. To put things in another way, this is average wealth in Australia at the moment by income quintile, by 20% slices of the population. What we see is that for the poorest 20% of the population, on average, their total wealth, the value of everything they own, is $31,000 each. The top 20%, the average wealth of that group is $2.2 million each. That's the wealth gap. That's what drives me to despair. Maybe our issue is about asylum seekers. Great, let's act. Maybe our issue is about remote communities. I put it to you, though, that one of the problems we have in our modern church, in our contemporary society, is that we can get a little bit stirred up, but generally we'd rather have a moan. So how do we respond to many of our social issues? We'll all be ruined, said Hanrahan, in accents most forlorn. Outside the church, our mass began, one frosty Sunday morn. The congregation stood about, coat collars to the ear, and talked of stock and crops and droughts, as it had done for years. It's looking crook, said Daniel Croak. Bedad, it's crook, my lad, for never since the banks went broke has seasons been so bad. I suggest John O'Brien, Reverend John O'Brien, got it right about 200 years ago. Here we go. Okay, I want to just finish with a few observations about what can we do? What can we do? The first one is to recognise our capacity to influence. Indeed, I suggest that our community is pretty tired of political leadership, and our political leadership is coming from the back of the peloton. We have a community, we have in fact political leaders, political people that are looking for the breakaway group, the ideas, the leadership and thinking to come from those outside the political process. We need leaders to drag the peloton along with them. We need to spend time testing observations and, most importantly, knowing solutions. We need to know and ignore the naysayers. And I hate to say it, but the church is full of naysayers. Far too many of us are naysayers. Let's listen to what can be done, not what can't be done. It's about building relationships. I so often hear people say, oh, it's all the fault of the media. We have some wonderful journalists in this state. Indeed, if I can just pick on our Journalist of the Year this year, Sarah Martin. Stunning young woman. And one of the reasons she won her Journalism of the Year award is because she was prepared to go with Jonathan Nichols, the paper tracker program from Uniting Communities, up to the APY lands and sit and meet the people and talk and listen and write articles for the national public, and she's still writing them. So we have great journalists, great leaders in our media. Sarah is just one example. I think we have to be bold. We have to be bold about what we believe. We have to be bold about democracy. We have to be back listening to people. And again, Uniting Church agencies and others are playing a really active role behind the scenes at the moment in talking with governments, with regulators, with all sorts of people about how to better engage with people to find out what people are really thinking. So there is hope in the process, but it's tough work. And finally, we have to listen to Habakkuk. And I'll tell you what, if I do have a gravestone, I reckon this is what I want carved on it. Habakkuk 2:2. The Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so that he may run who reads it, or so the runner may carry it, depending on your translation. Point 1. Point 2 from Habakkuk, or from God talking to Habakkuk, that perhaps picks up a bit of what Andrew was saying. Change is a non-linear process. We bang away for ages and ages going nowhere, and suddenly the opportunity arises. God says, for still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end, it will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come, it will not delay. So let's get out there and make things happen.